What is up, guys? TEJ here, and in today's video we are going to be reviewing the brand new Srixon ZX7 MKII Driver. So let's get right into it. Alright guys, so the ZX7 MKII Driver from Srixon. This is going to be one of three MKII ZX models from Srixon Golf. You've got the 5, the 5LS, and then the 7. The 7 is going to be the most, I would say, player-style driver model, more workable, a little bit smaller head size. The ZX5LS, obviously going to be the lowest spinning, and then the ZX5 is going to be higher launching, higher forgiving for players who need it. So something interesting right off the bat with these ZX MKII drivers is going to be the fact that they are full titanium, which is pretty rare to see nowadays, and I believe it's only one of two big OEMs that are going full titanium, with the other being Titleist in the new TSR lineup. So getting into some other design elements on the ZX MKII drivers, the first interesting thing is going to be Srixon's rebound frame, and as described by them, these drivers essentially have two flex zones in the head, the first being the face itself, and the second being the sides around the face. Think top, bottom, heel, and toe areas. And essentially what these flex zones help create is a spring within a spring-like effect, hopefully elevating ball speed not just on good strikes, but especially missed strikes out of the heel, low, and toe areas on the face. You'll also have a star frame crown design in these drivers, which helps reinforce the titanium crown, in turn allowing Srixon to lighten the crown, which then in turn allows them to free up some discretionary weight that they use to help optimize launch and spin conditions in these drivers. From an adjustability perspective on the ZX7, you're going to have two weights, one in the heel and one in the toe, that are going to allow you to adjust your ball flight, whether you want to draw it a little bit more or fade it a little bit more. And you're also going to have a really cool adapter on these drivers that allow you to adjust not only lie, but also change face angle independent of loft, which is something that I have not really seen on any adapters from other OEMs. Stock shaft in the ZX7 is going to be the Project X Hazardous Black Gen 4 in either a 60 or 70 gram weight option. As far as the grip goes, you're going to have the Golf Pride Tour Velvet 360 grip. For loft options, you either have a 9.5 degree or 10.5 degree available, at least in the ZX7 model. And then as far as the retail price, you're going to be looking at $500 US. All right, guys, so that is pretty much the rundown of this Srixon ZX7 MKII. So having said all that, let's go ahead and get into my opinions on the driver. Now, as far as looks go with the ZX7 MKII, I think that this is the category that really leads the way for this driver. In terms of shaping, I think the shaping is beautiful. It fits my eye absolutely perfectly. A little bit more pear-shaped, a little bit smaller head. I absolutely love the matte crown. If you guys have watched the reviews of a lot of the drivers I've done, I do not like gloss driver heads. I love the fact that they went matte gray on this head. And also hear what I just said. They went matte gray. They did not go matte, boring black. They kind of separated themselves a little bit by going gray. So in terms of looks at a dress, I think this is a phenomenal looking driver. Getting into the sole, and this I also love as well. I think that there's enough going on to make this driver look cool, but not so much to where you're like, what the heck is this thing? This thing looks terrible. I love it. I think it's great. What's kind of interesting to note is that these glossy areas almost come a little bit unfinished or sort of pre-scratched, if you will. At least that's what I saw in the sunlight. So if you're checking this out at the store and you're like, why does that look scratched up? I think that's just the way it's supposed to come. Overall, I think that that actually looks kind of cool. It's going to get scratched. It's going to get used as you play it. I kind of like the fact that it comes like that, so you're not so worried about doing it on the golf course. In terms of looks, though, as a whole, I think this is a phenomenal looking driver, and I would argue it is probably the best looking driver on the market currently, at least in my opinion. Moving on to feel now, and this is a really good feeling driver out of the center of the face. It feels hot, but sort of in a way that maybe a baseball would feel off of a wood bat. It's more of a crack as opposed to sort of a hot, fast feeling. I'm not really sure exactly how to describe it, but what I can say is that it does feel good out of the center of the face. With regards to mishits, I think it does decently well from a feel perspective, but in my opinion, you can definitely tell that there is a bit of a drop off in terms of feel, and I noticed especially on lower face strikes and heel strikes, it almost feels like the ball is kind of spinning up, which I don't personally love. But with that being said, I think that with who this driver is made for, it's made for the better player. If you're somebody who does consistently strike it out of the middle, you should really have no problems with the feel. I think it feels very nice. Getting into sound now, and this is an area where I do not personally get along with ZX7 Mark II all that well. Given the fact that it is a full titanium design, the driver sounds a little bit tinny, a little bit higher pitched, which is not something that I personally prefer. And it's not absolutely awful, but the way I would describe it as is kind of how Ping drivers have been over the last few years, just a little bit loud as a whole, which, as I said, is just not really something that I like in my drivers. Moving on to workability, and this is where I find the ZX7 Mark II to be very successful. Now, you heard me talk about it earlier. Out of the three driver heads, this is going to be the most workable, and that's exactly what I saw. Whether it be drawing it, fading it, or flighting it, I could do pretty much anything I wanted to do. And what I loved most is the fact that I could hit tighter curves. With a lot of drivers nowadays, I only find myself being able to hit big curving shots. With this, on the other hand, if I only wanted to move it 20 or 30 feet, that felt very easy to do, which was great to see. Getting into forgiveness now, and this is where I think the ZX7 does okay. I found that bigger mishits were punished relatively harshly in terms of dispersion, but small mishits seem to end up okay. Really, the big thing though I noticed is that distance-wise, on heel and low strikes especially, the drives seem to spin up really quickly, 600 or 700 RPMs, and easily were 15 to 20 yards short of some of my good drives, which was something that I would say was a little bit disappointing to see. With that being said, if you're looking for max forgiveness, the ZX5 is probably a better driver for you. And if you do have good control over your strike point, you can hit plenty of drives out of the center. I think that this driver is plenty forgiving for that better player. But like I said, if you're somebody who struggles with that, maybe the ZX5 or ZX5 LS is going to be a better driver for you. Getting into distance now, and I'll put these numbers on the screen. I compared ZX7 against my TSR3, but I want to preface and tell you guys that these are a little bit higher spinning. The shaft was not completely optimized for this test, and thus the reason that these drives are a little bit higher spinning. But nonetheless, let's just get right into it. We'll start with my TSR3. Ball speed 172 miles an hour, launch 11.5 degrees, spin 2812, and carry 292 yards. ZX7 Mark II, 171.4 ball speed, 11.4 launch, 2889 spin, and 289.4 yards of carry. So what do these numbers mean? Well, we'll start with ball speed. I think in terms of ball speed, it shows that this ZX7 Mark II does hold up with the TSR3 out of the center of the face. Very similar in terms of launch numbers as well. Spin was within 80 RPMs, which is very, very nice to see, and carry within 3 yards. I think overall, out of the center of the face, this driver will hold up ball speed and distance-wise with pretty much anything out there. The issue for me was going to be on those low and heel strikes. I took these drivers out on the golf course again after doing this test to just kind of see where spin was at and ball speed was at on the missed strikes, and that's kind of where I saw a bigger gap. I would say that it was closer to 2 or 3 miles an hour ball speed-wise between the TSR3 and the ZX7 Mark II, and spin-wise was probably 300 to 400 RPMs less with my TSR3. So I think out of the center of the face, this is a contender with some of the best stuff. For me, maybe, I think the struggle was going to be on those mishits. It just didn't seem like it wanted to keep up with my TSR3 on those misstrikes. All right, guys, so having said all that and given you pretty much every opinion I can on this ZX7 Mark II driver, I'm going to rate it an 8.8 out of 10. And for me personally, there are two things that are holding this driver back mainly. The first is going to be the sound. I think it's a little bit too high-pitched, a little bit too tinny, and it's one of those things that I think will deter people from buying this driver over other OEMs. It's something that has held Ping back in the past few years, and I think it is going to be something that holds this driver back slightly. The second is going to be forgiveness on those misstrikes. Dispersion-wise, it just wasn't quite great. I found myself missing a decent amount of fairways, which is just not quite the game that I can play, at least at this stage in my career. And the second thing is gonna be the distance on those mishits. Ball speed dropped off relatively significantly in comparison to my TSR3, and spin went up relatively drastically, especially out of the heel and low spots on the face, which again is just not something that I love to see. Now, you shouldn't expect mishits to be great, but at the same time, I think there are some other drivers out there that offer a little bit more in terms of forgiveness on those misstrikes. In terms of looks, I think it is probably one of the best looking drivers on the market currently. I would honestly argue it is the best looking driver on the market currently. And in terms of feel and ball speed out of the center, it will hold up with some of the best stuff on the market. For me personally, though, there were just a couple of things that held the driver back. Guys, that's a review. If you enjoyed it, be sure to give it a like, comment. If you have any questions at all, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Go ahead and click that notification bell, and also make sure you're following us on our other socials, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. We'll catch you in the next video. Peace.